Mexico on North America and where we're headed with the North American Free Trade Agreement. And I really do believe we're at a very important crossroads in our trade relationship within North America. Over 20 years of free trade, we've managed to create probably the greatest free trade area in the world. Trade has tripled between the three countries to now over $1 trillion. Just between the US and Mexico, that figure has reached $530 billion. And we've increased dramatically the flow of investment between all three countries. But beyond the numbers, one aspect that really exceeded all expectations of anybody who was involved in the NAFTA negotiations that at the time was making predictions as to where we would be headed within the NAFTA region is the level of supply chain integration that we've created. The way we have created interconnected industrial clusters across Mexico, the US, and Canada, where we exchange products, where products cross the border 8 or 9 times before winding up in a final product that is either consumed in the region or exported to the rest of the world with a very dramatic competitive edge vis-a-vis other countries when you have that level of division of labor and intra-industry trade. That's one of the key elements, and that is why when Mexico exports to the world, not just within the NAFTA, but within its network of 11 trade agreements with 46 countries, 40% of what we export comes from the United States. So we're really building products together. We are working towards increasing the competitiveness together in the manufacturing of North American products. So that is a key element that we must take into consideration when we analyze where we should be headed with the NAFTA. You look at, in terms of a lot of the talk that's out there in terms of the impact of trade agreements on jobs. You look at the fact that 5 million jobs in the US depend on trade with Mexico and another 9 with trade with Canada. So almost 15 million jobs in the US are related to trade with its number 1 and number 2 customers in the world, which is Canada and the United States. So that's a very peculiar element of North American integration that has to be taken into consideration. So there's the employment aspect of companies in the US exporting to their NAFTA partners, but increasingly, for example, in the case of Mexico, over the last 15 years, we have almost $50 billion of accumulated foreign direct investment from Mexican companies into the United States that create over 125,000 jobs. And this means jobs in specific communities. So in sending the message out there as to what are the benefits of the NAFTA, we must delve deeper into the numbers and not just stay at the $530 billion level that we've heard a lot, but talk about how, for example, Mexican company, the Acero, steel manufacturer, is supporting 700 jobs in Ohio and in Missouri by investing in plants that produce construction materials, nuts, bolts, nails, etc., that utilize Mexican steel and that are able to become more competitive vis-a-vis other companies that do not have those linkages to Mexico. So we have many examples like that. Mining companies in Arizona supporting 800 jobs in a community that has 600 population in Hayden, Arizona. So examples like that are peppered throughout the United States, both in terms of the presence of Mexican investment in the US and the benefits of Mexican companies that export to Mexico, US companies that export to Mexico or to Canada. So those are big benefits that we have to get out there and speak about, both the government and the private sector. So when we're looking at what we could call NAFTA 2.0, where do we go from here? From what we have built, I think there's 3 main pillars here. And the first one I've discussed, which is essentially doing a realistic facts-based assessment of the impact of the North American Free Trade Agreement on the economies of all 3 countries. And I've given examples specifically on the benefits for the US. So we have to analyze that deeply and distribute this information, get it out there so that people understand what impact it has in their day-to-day lives. The second big element is a recognition, of course, that our trade agreement can be strengthened, it can be modernized. You know, it was negotiated over 25 years ago with many of the disciplines that we incorporated in the negotiation. The TPP didn't even exist. Elements in intellectual property rights protection, the digital economy, state-owned enterprises. There's a whole list of issues there that we can analyze. And there's a very strong cooperative agenda that exists already between Mexico and the US and also with Canada, of course, but in the example of Mexico and the US, a cooperative agenda to work on elements to increase the competitiveness of the region. In other words, we eliminated tariffs over 20-some years of trade between Mexico and the US and Canada. But now the next 20 years have to be as to how do we reduce the cost of transactions between our countries. So that involves key areas such as increasing border efficiency, investing in infrastructure in the border, regulatory cooperation, looking at elements that we're already analyzing in other key areas in the world where we're negotiating, which is, and I will mention the Pacific Alliance, the movement of professionals. That's something that we have not been able to advance over the years within the NAFTA region, but we should definitely accelerate the pace on looking at all these elements of competitiveness to actually build on what we have and strengthen it and not move backwards. Third of all, we have to understand that trade is a win-win proposition. So we have to start getting away from this argument that trade is a zero-sum game. If my neighbor does well, that means I do badly. If I export, it's okay. If I import, it's not okay. And all those arguments are economically false, and they do not translate into the realities of what we're seeing in the marketplace and in the job creation in any of the three countries. So we need to have that assessment clearly. In terms of Mexico moving forward, of course, we want to have a very constructive dialogue with the new administration coming in along the lines of what we have described. But at the same time, we're not standing idle. We're moving ahead with an aggressive program of trade liberalization and diversification. We were members of the TPP, as was mentioned. We have the TPP bill in our Senate being analyzed and possibly voted on in the next session in the spring in Mexico. We have to, of course, analyze what will happen if the US will be able to join, or if we will have to have a different type of arrangement within Asia Pacific. But the advantages of TPP, as Wendy was mentioning, you have a region that's going to be the engine of growth over the next few years. Over the next 25 years, Asia Pacific is going to add almost 1.5 billion people to the middle class. These are consumers, and you want to be in the front line when that opportunity opens up, and it's already opening up. So we will continue either through the TPP and or looking at options, whether it's bilaterally or other plurilateral arrangements. Of course, the Pacific Alliance is a key element because I think for once, Mexico is able to engage in a fully open manner with countries in Latin America that have the same values and the same pursuit of an open trade environment in their economy. So I think there's a lot that we can continue to do that in that region, and that's why a lot of these countries that are observers to the Pacific Alliance are very interested in what's happening there. And given a lot of the changes that are taking place domestically in Brazil and Argentina, there's an increased engagement with these two countries to look at options to really enhance our trade with them. And as Damien mentioned, the effort that we're making to modernize and strengthen our free trade agreement with the European Union in terms of market access and also many of the disciplines that can also be upgraded because it's an agreement that's in effect since the year 2000. But the reality, and as Wendy was saying, other countries are not stopping. Competition out there is fierce. You have RCEP getting their act together and advancing, trying to set the rules of the game going forward. And so, we have to do the same in North America. And that's why I say that we're in a very important crossroads in our history. We have the chance to be the most competitive region of the world, but that is only going to happen if we actively, both governments, the private sector, political actors at all levels, really do a fair, facts-based analysis on what trade brings to the region and how we can become more competitive going forward, because competition is not going to stop. Thank you.